Silence is not an absence, but a presence. You know, there's power in silence. I used to be afraid of the silence, and I wasn't even intentionally afraid of it. I wasn't aware that I was afraid of it, but I was definitely afraid because silence felt so loud to me. I grew up constantly surrounded and consumed by noise because I grew up in a big family and there's always noise. There was always a little one running around. There was always noise from someone fighting or laughing or neighbors being there, friends over. There was always noise. The TV being on. And then when the house would grow quiet, it was deafening. So when I first moved out and into my own apartment, the first thing that I noticed was how off-putting the silence was. I would get home and I would expect it to be noisy and chaotic, and there would just be nothing. Just the hum of my refrigerator. And I really hated it at first. It wasn't even that I hated it, but I really tried to ignore it. I tried to ignore how loud the silence was. I live alone and I'm really introverted, but still, the silence scared me. When I look back on it, I noticed that I would always avoid it. I would always have music playing or put on a podcast or an audiobook or play a YouTube video in the back. And I love all of these art forms. I do. But when you spend as much time alone as I do, you really need to notice, am I using this music or this podcast to fill me up? Or am I using it to drown me out? To drown out a certain part of me that I don't want to pay attention to? Is this noise or is this medicine? I started to become more aware and conscious of everything that I was feeding to myself, and that includes the things that I hear. So I had to be really conscious. Is this noise or is this medicine? Because I don't want to just fill my air with noise just because I'm not comfortable with the silence. Is it noise or is it medicine? So the more time that I spent alone, the more and more okay I became with silence. The more conscious and aware I became of what I used to fill the voids, to fill the space in between. Because when you're alone, you have more time to choose what exactly it is that you want to fill your day with. You know, there's no one else with you to decide that they want to put on this music or they want to put on this movie or they want to talk. You really are aware and are in control of everything that you hear. Well, maybe not everything, but a majority of what you hear. So I started to become more okay with silence. Because for the first maybe month or two, maybe even 3 months of living alone, I really just couldn't do it. I would try to, but I would always find myself sneaking some music in here or there. And it wasn't that the music's bad. It's not that at all. It's just that I wasn't comfortable with the silence. I think because we're faced with so much noise, we forget the power in silence. How powerful it is to be able to be in silence. So then I started to go on walks with no phone, no headphones, or I would drive to work in silence without music. I would go about my yoga flows with no music. I would cook in silence and then I would eat in silence. I don't do it all the time, but when I do, it's comforting. And I won't even notice it half the time. I'll just be sitting there and I'll realize, oh wow, I am fully present right now. What I discovered about the silence is that it's not about it being quiet. It's about how much more you can hear. When I'm in a space of silence, I can observe all of my thoughts and let them pass instead of constantly covering them up. And then you start to notice that you generally just have less thoughts because you give all of your attention to them. You acknowledge them and you send them on their way. So they're not sitting in the back of your mind. They're not hiding in corners here and there, waiting, bottling up, waiting for that perfect moment for them to just overgrow, to overstay their welcome, to make you feel uncomfortable, to make you forget who you truly are. And that's what thoughts do. Because you are not your thoughts. You are observing your thoughts. So when we don't allow ourselves the space, the time, and the energy to simply sit and observe our thoughts, they're like cancer. They grow in your head. They take up space that they shouldn't be. They deserve to be acknowledged. They need to be acknowledged. Otherwise, they gain too much power. Which is almost ironic because how can something gain power when you don't give anything to it? But by giving your thoughts attention, by observing them, you actually take their power away. Because once you observe a thought, well, it's kind of over. You observe it and then it moves on. And then the thought can always come back, but then you just observe it again and you move on. And I've noticed that it's a lot easier to go about silence when you're aware of how to observe your thoughts because you're used to it. And now your thoughts don't make you uncomfortable. And that's the sweet spot. Because when you have less thoughts and you've acknowledged them all, then you have more room to just sit with yourself, your true self. You're not constantly creating new thoughts or letting new thoughts rise because you've simply observed all of them and you can exist as your true form. And this is where I can hear God. I can truly, fully hear God and be in alignment. So I like to allow myself these times in silence so that I can be fully in alignment. It doesn't always have to be quiet. But like I said, the silence is not about it being quiet. It's about being able to hear everything. You can hear the hum of the universe, of the world around you. Silence and quiet are not the same thing. When you're in silence, you can be fully present and you are fully aligned because essentially all that is asked of us is to be present. I don't think that meditating should be separate from life. I think that's maybe where I got it wrong or I got it confused when I first started meditating because I would separate everything. I would see meditating as something that I did in the confines of my room on a pillow, eyes closed, completely zen. But then when I would come out of that space, it's not that I would forget, but it's almost like I created such a barrier between the two. Between the life that I live alone when I'm meditating, when I'm in alignment, versus the life that I live in the world. Why can't they coexist? They do coexist. So now I go about my life and everything is a meditation. When I thought of meditation as one singular form, as one separate part of my life, it really didn't do much for me. But now that I can get a better understanding of how everything is connected, everything is meditative. These talks that we have, you and I, right here, right now, these are meditative talks. I am aligned and I'm present and I'm tapping into all of the available energy that's there, all of the energy given to me by God to extend and express to you. And all of the energy that was given to you that you extend and express just by being here and listening. And even though I technically haven't even uploaded my first episode of this podcast, I can still feel your energy. I can feel how ready and excited and present that you are. These talks, they're meditative. The definition of meditation, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, is the act of giving your attention to only one thing. So really, it's just being present. And when I find myself in silence, it really forces you to be present. And I'm not saying you can't be present amongst the noise or the music or other stimulation that you can hear. But I'm just asking you to ask yourself, before you turn on your music, before you turn on the TV, ask yourself, why? And just sit with your thoughts for a little bit. And you don't always have to do this. But if you find yourself in a negative loop and you find yourself constantly drowning out your thoughts, just try sitting in silence for a minute. In anything that you do, you don't have to physically sit down, close your eyes and meditate, but maybe on your next drive, just drive in silence and see what happens. Just look at it as a little bit of an experiment with your mind. See what thoughts come up. And if it's too much, then turn the music back on and then go journal about it later. I just think that silence should be reconsidered, because silence is not quiet. Silence gives you the ability to hear everything. And I truly believe that that's what we need. I think that society as a whole has an aversion to silence. It's just part of our culture at this point. We constantly like there to be music, noise, laughter. Silence just kind of makes everyone uncomfortable. Do you ever go into a restaurant and they don't have any music playing in the background? All you can hear is the clattering of the fork scraping against the plate. Silence makes us uncomfortable. And I think it really goes hand in hand with the societal shame around people being shy or quiet. Where does that shame come from? It's because we're taught that silence is bad. We're taught that silence should make you uncomfortable. So then whenever we're in a space of silence, we feel that. We feel uncomfortable. You feel uneasy. You feel like you need something to fill that space. Because not only do we not like silence, but we definitely don't like being uncomfortable. Because silence requires us to go beyond and to put in that extra step and embrace what might be uncomfortable. That's why we have such an aversion to it. When you are uncomfortable in silence, whether it be when you're alone or you're uncomfortable in silence with others, it gives you an opportunity to dig deeper and look at what's really there. You can feel into the energy. We don't constantly need to fill everything with noise. Listen to the silence. It's very telling. It's louder than any voice, any music note, any sound whatsoever. Silence is not an absence, but a presence. It will tell you everything that you need to know. So I'd like to ask you to breathe into silence with me. As we take this deep breath, acknowledge and accept that silence is not an absence, but a presence. So let's breathe in and exhale. Thank you so much for being here with me today.